In this video, we take a look at functions, clearly the most important idea in a pre-calculus course. When I think about functions, the main thing that I think of is some sort of machine. And in particular, I think of some sort of machine that takes some sort of input and spits out some sort of output. I borrow this drawing from James Tanton. We have some sort of machine, an input goes in here, and an output comes out here. Now, when most students begin pre-calculus, they have a very strong association between the idea of functions and the idea of equations. I want to really emphasize that functions are much more general than equations. We can talk about functions that have nothing to do with equations, although equations will often form the basis of our functions. So what I want to do in this video is look at an equation, and given a single equation, I want to frame it as a few different functions. So here's our equation. So I have some equation xy equals 1. How can I think about this as a machine with an input and an output? One way to think of this is that if I feed x into this machine, I'll be able to tell what y is. For example, if I tell you that x equals 4, you can look at this machine and say, oh, well then y equals 1/4. And in this sense, the input of x equals 4 generates the output of y equals 1/4. So our first framing of this equation as a function is that if we input some x value, we can get out some specific y value. Now, there is one caveat here. If I feed this function x equals 0, I'll find that there is no y value that works. So I'm going to specify that I input an x that is not equal to 0, and I get out an output of y. Our next framing of this equation as a function is quite a bit different. From this perspective, what I want to think about is feeding this equation an entire ordered pair. What do I get out now? Well, I get out either a valid equation or an invalid equation. So if I feed my function the ordered pair 2, 1/2, I get out 1 equals 1, and I get out something true. On the other hand, if I feed it the ordered pair 3, 2, I get out 6 equals 1, and I get out something false. So here, I'm inputting an ordered pair, and I'm outputting either a true or a false. I could write f of 4 equals 1/4 in this framing. And over here, I could write something quite different. I'll use the letter g to signify this function and f to signify this one, although they're both based on the same equation. Here, I could write that g of 2, 3 equals false. This is quite different than what we see from functions in an Algebra 1 course, or an Algebra 2 course for that matter. As we move into higher mathematics, our views of functions become more and more flexible. This type of function, where your output, rather than being a number, is either true or false, is called a Boolean function. This word Boolean is associated with ideas of binary, of zeros and ones, of trues and falses. So here we have a function that receives a real number and outputs a real number. And here we have a function that receives an ordered pair and outputs some Boolean digit, true or false.